Welcome back to Horrifying Obsession. Today, we're diving into a chilling and mysterious case that took place in a small village on the outskirts of Vietnam. What seemed at first like a simple missing persons case quickly unfolded into a horrifying discovery that shook the community due to the brutality and cold-blooded nature of the perpetrator. On the afternoon of July 15, 2023, a young couple walked down a narrow alley in Trung Loc village, located on the outskirts of Quang Tri City. They stopped in front of an old, run-down rental house, deep within the alley. The house looked abandoned, with signs of decay on the roof and tightly shut windows. The couple paced back and forth outside, trying to peer through the cracks, but it was too dark inside to see anything. Even though the front door was locked from the outside, they decided to knock, hoping someone would answer. However, no one came. After waiting for about 30 minutes with no response, the two, identified as Lê Thị Ha and her boyfriend, decided to break the lock using tools they had brought. Cautiously, they entered the living room and made their way toward the bedroom. But what they saw in the small room was far beyond what they could have ever imagined. Lying in the middle of the floor was the body of a woman, her clothes disheveled, and her body in an advanced state of decomposition. The room reeked of decay, and dried blood stains covered the floor, creating a scene of pure horror. Shaken and trembling, Ha immediately called the police. Her voice was filled with fear, and she sobbed uncontrollably throughout the call, stating that she had just found her mother's body in the rental house. The Quang Tri City Police quickly arrived at the scene. The rental house was located in the basement of a building that faced the main street. The ground floor was rented out as a shop, and the second floor was a residential apartment with higher rental rates. Only the basement, where the crime was discovered, was rented out for a cheaper price. The crime scene was found in the outermost room of the basement, right next to the narrow alley. As they investigated the scene, the police found blood splatters on the walls and floors of the bedroom. The victim was a small-framed woman, about 155 centimeters tall. She was wearing disheveled clothing and was lying on her back with severe injuries to her chest. Initial forensic examinations revealed multiple broken ribs and a fractured sternum, which caused significant internal damage and ultimately led to her death. Based on the level of decomposition, the police estimated that the crime had occurred about 6 months prior, around January or February 2023. Upon further investigation, the police found no signs of robbery or theft. The victim's purse still contained small amounts of cash, and an old mobile phone lay on the bed. This led the investigators to initially rule out robbery as the motive. Instead, they began to suspect that this could be a murder stemming from personal conflict. But there were still unanswered questions. Why did Lê Thị Ha break into the house? And why was she so distraught upon discovering the body? What was her connection to the victim? The answers came when Ha revealed that the victim was none other than her mother, Nguyen Thi Lan, 59 years old. Ha explained that her mother had lost contact with the family for over 6 months. The rental house was one Ha had rented for her mother after she separated from her husband. Initially, Ha thought her mother had simply gone somewhere without informing anyone. But as the rental agreement was coming to an end, Ha and her boyfriend decided to break into the house when no one answered. Ha's story left the police puzzled. The family had not reported Nguyen Thi Lan's disappearance for over half a year, only returning to check the house when the lease was due to expire. This raised questions about the family's relationship with the victim. When asked why no one had tried to contact her mother for so long, Ha explained that her parents frequently argued and fought, and after her father returned to their hometown, her mother lived alone in the rental house. Therefore, when she lost contact, the family assumed that she had gone off to live with another man. The police continued their meticulous investigation and uncovered some suspicious clues. On the floor behind the bedroom door, they found a yellow t-shirt and a pair of black and white striped shorts, possibly belonging to the victim. The t-shirt had small bloodstains, lying about 20 centimeters away from the victim's body. Additionally, there were no signs that the body had been dragged or moved. The room was also littered with beer bottles under the bed, suggesting that the victim may have been living a difficult and lonely life before her murder. The mobile phone found on the bed was sent to the police technical department for further investigation. The data analysis revealed suspicious calls and messages from two unknown numbers ending in 4831 and 9562. The last call received by the victim was from the number ending in 6328 at 6:40 a.m. on February 2, 2023, just hours before the estimated time of her death. Police tracked down the owners of the two numbers. The first number, 4831, belonged to a woman named Nguyen Thi Hong, 47 years old, originally from a small district near Quang Tri. Hong admitted that she had known the victim through mutual friends and had been in regular contact with her. Hong shared that Lan often complained about her family life, particularly the conflicts with her husband and children. She also mentioned that Lan had been involved in an extramarital affair with another man, but did not provide further details about him. The second number, ending in 9562, was registered to a man named Trun Van Binh, 60 years old. During questioning, Bin admitted that he had been romantically involved with Nguyen Thi Lan. Their relationship had begun in early 2022, and they had traveled together to Haiphong in February 2022. However, their affair ended in mid-2022 when Lan's husband found out. Bin insisted that he had nothing to do with Lan's death, and that his last message to her was merely an empty threat sent in anger, believing that Lan no longer wanted to see him. Based on these clues, the police continued their investigation and ruled out Bin as the suspect. However, discrepancies in witness testimonies and further analysis of the evidence led them to shift their focus to the victim's husband, Lê Văn Thinh, 68 years old. The police pressed on with their investigation, collecting statements from people connected to the victim. According to Ha, her mother had led a solitary life before her disappearance, working various manual labor jobs at small eateries near the rental house. Lan was isolated, rarely socializing with neighbors, and had no relatives visiting her. After separating from her husband, she moved into the small rental house to live alone, cut off from her husband and daughter. The house, located in the basement with little natural light, was considered the most insecure area in the building. Ha explained that her mother was a reserved and enduring woman who never wanted to burden her children with personal problems. After the separation, Ha and her brother knew that their mother's life was becoming increasingly lonely and bleak. Lan had once suggested divorcing Thien, but he refused. She also confided to a close friend that she was exhausted by her unhappy marriage and was seeking a way out. However, Lan never told anyone about her affair with Bin, which the police suspected could have been a key factor leading to her murder. Armed with new leads, the police immediately summoned Lê Văn Thinh for questioning. Thinh, an elderly man with a tall but weary appearance, admitted that he and his wife had been in conflict for many years, especially after she expressed her desire for a divorce. Thinh said that in mid-2022, after discovering her affair, they had numerous arguments, and he attempted to control her by restricting her from going out or interacting with others. However, Lan became increasingly distant and determined to escape her current life. During the interrogation, Thinh claimed that after a major argument with his wife in late September 2022, he returned to his hometown to live with his nephew and lost contact with Lan. He denied having anything to do with her death and said he had no knowledge of her disappearance. However, his statement began to unravel when neighbors provided conflicting accounts. Ngo Thi Phuong, a neighbor living next to the rental house, reported that on October 1, 2022, she saw Thien entering and leaving Lan's rental house. According to Phuong, there had been a loud argument between the couple that morning, but she didn't think much of it as they had argued many times before. Later that afternoon, Phuong saw Thien leave, and from that day on, Lan's house remained tightly shut. Phuong also added that she had witnessed Thien physically abusing Lan on multiple occasions. Whenever they argued, Thien would become aggressive, and Phuong had to intervene several times to stop him from beating his wife. This information deepened the police's suspicions of Thien. Nevertheless, he continued to deny any involvement in Lan's death. The detectives Doubts grew when there was no evidence to support Thien's claim that he had left for his hometown before October 1st. As the investigation continued, the task force uncovered a crucial detail. Thien and Lan's 5-year-old grandson had been living with them during the time of the crime. The boy became the most important witness in the case, and despite his young age, the police decided to bring him to the crime scene to uncover more about what had happened on October 2nd, 2022. During the questioning, the boy provided a shockingly accurate account of the events that day. The boy recalled that after his grandmother received a brief phone call that morning, his grandparents began arguing. His grandfather became furious and hit his grandmother multiple times. Terrified, the boy hid behind the bed and witnessed the entire scene. His grandfather kicked and punched his grandmother, causing her to collapse and bleed profusely. After beating her unconscious, his grandfather locked the door, took the boy back to their hometown, and warned him not to tell anyone what had happened. This key detail helped the police establish the timeline of Lan's murder. Armed with the boy's testimony, the police returned to the crime scene to verify the evidence. They found that the boy's account matched the conditions at the scene perfectly. Blood splatters on the floor and walls indicated that the victim had been violently attacked before her death. Under the bed, where the boy had hidden, were more blood splatters and scratch marks, suggesting that the victim had desperately tried to defend herself in her final moments. With irrefutable evidence, Le Van Thien finally confessed to his crime. He admitted that on October 2nd, 2022, after an argument about divorce, he lost control and beat his wife until she was unconscious. Instead of calling for help when he saw her gasping for breath, he locked the door and left, as his anger had clouded his judgment. He took his grandson back to their hometown, leaving his wife to die alone in the rental house where no one would find her. The conclusion of the case shocked the entire community. On October 22, 2023, the Quang Tri People's Court held a trial for the murder. Despite Thien's claims that he did not intend to kill his wife, his violent behavior and decision to leave her for dead led the court to sentence him to 15 years in prison. For a 68-year-old man like Thien, this sentence was essentially a life sentence. If he survived until the end of his sentence, he would be 83 years old and unlikely to rebuild his life. This case of domestic violence not only devastated the victim's family, but also sparked widespread debate about the community's responsibility and the flaws in the system meant to protect victims of domestic abuse. Many questioned why Lan had not sought help earlier, or at least reported her situation to the authorities before it was too late. However, experts pointed out that cases like Lan's are not uncommon in today's society. In discussions following the case, many professionals noted that women suffering from domestic violence often find themselves isolated and fearful, unable to report their husband's abuse for fear of retaliation or lack of societal support. Before her death, Nguyen Thi Lan had lived a quiet life, enduring loneliness and family conflicts for many years. Friends and relatives later shared that she always appeared resilient and rarely complained about her family issues, but deep down, she had suffered immense emotional turmoil and pressure. Many times, she had wanted to leave her marriage to Thien, but for various reasons, she could not make a decisive break. Financial difficulties, economic dependence on her husband, and the fear of social judgment, particularly in Vietnamese culture, where divorce is often stigmatized, held her back. As for Le Van Thien, the investigation revealed that he had been reprimanded multiple times at work for his temper and inability to control his emotions. Colleagues described him as someone who often resorted to violence to resolve conflicts within his family, especially when he had been drinking. His violent behavior not only affected his wife, but also caused unease among those who witnessed his outbursts. However, due to his tendency to hide his shame and maintain appearances in front of neighbors, Thien always acted calm and pretended that nothing serious was wrong with his family. The court proceedings in October 2023 stirred up considerable public controversy. During the trial, Thien expressed remorse, claiming that he had not intended to kill his wife and that his actions were driven by uncontrollable anger. He He also cited his wife's affair and constant demands for a divorce as the primary reasons for his emotional breakdown. However, the prosecution argued that, regardless of the circumstances, his violent actions and decision to leave his wife in a critical condition were cruel and warranted punishment. The trial lasted for several days, with forensic and psychological experts present. Psychological evaluations revealed that Thien exhibited signs of extreme control over his family, a psychological condition often seen in men who cannot accept their wives having an independent life or no longer depending on them. This was evident in his behavior, as he sought to control every aspect of Lan's life after discovering her affair, and even tried to prevent her from divorcing him. Faced with the prospect of losing his wife, he could no longer control his actions. The trial concluded with the court sentencing Lê Văn Thien to 15 years in prison for murder. Although some believe this sentence was too lenient given the gravity of the crime, considering his age and health, it was essentially a life sentence. The consequences of this case extended far beyond the legal punishment. Lan's family, particularly her daughter Lê Thị Ha, was deeply affected emotionally after the truth was revealed. Ha not only lost her mother, but also had to come to terms with the horrifying reality that her own father had committed the crime. This caused immense psychological trauma for Ha, who admitted that she had been living in shock and confusion ever since the case was uncovered. In an interview with the media, Ha shared that although her father had paid for his crime, the wounds in her heart would never heal. She felt guilty for not recognizing the signs of domestic violence that her mother had endured for so many years. If I had paid more attention to what my mother was going through, if I hadn't dismissed her small complaints about my father, maybe things would have been different, Ha said tearfully. She also revealed that living with this loss was incredibly difficult, and she hoped that her mother's story would serve as a warning to others in similar situations. Domestic violence is not just a private family matter, but a serious social issue. Following Lan's case, many non-governmental organizations and government agencies launched campaigns to raise awareness about domestic violence. Social forums also sparked heated discussions about the role of law in protecting victims of domestic abuse and how women like Lan could access help more easily before it was too late. Nguyen Thu Huynh, a family psychology consultant based in Hanoi, commented, "Domestic violence often stems from long-standing conflicts that are not properly addressed. In this case, we see that the conflict between Thien and Lan had lasted for many years. However, instead of seeking reconciliation or legal divorce, both held onto their grievances, ultimately leading to this unnecessary tragedy." According to statistics from the Ministry of Labor, War Invalids and Social Affairs, domestic violence cases increased significantly in 2022, particularly in families facing financial difficulties or infidelity. However, very few victims dared to report the violence due to fear of retaliation or social stigma. Lan's case serves as a wake-up call to society about the need to provide victims of domestic violence with safe spaces to seek help and protection. Another noteworthy aspect of this case was the role of the surrounding community. Many of Lan's neighbors admitted that they knew she was being abused by her husband, but no one intervened, thinking it was a private family matter. This attitude reflects a common mindset in Vietnamese society, where domestic violence is often seen as other people's business, and few are willing to get involved. In reality, had there been timely intervention from the community or authorities, this tragedy might have been prevented. After Thien was sentenced to 15 years in prison, the case did not immediately come to a close. Lan's family, especially her daughter Ha, went through a period of intense emotional turmoil. Not only was she grieving the loss of her mother, but she also had to confront the fact that her own father had committed such a terrible crime, leaving her directionless in life. Following the trial, Ha fell into deep depression. She sought help from psychological experts to cope with the trauma. Every time she recalled the horrific moment when she and her boyfriend discovered her mother's body in the rental house, she was haunted. In an interview afterward, she said, "I can't believe the father I once loved could do such a thing. I always thought he was just stubborn, but he turned out to be a murderer. That destroys all the memories and images I had of him. She also shared that her parents' relationship had been deteriorating for years, but she never imagined it would end in such a tragic way. The arguments she had witnessed growing up seemed like normal marital spats, but over time, they escalated into bigger conflicts, with her father's drinking and her mother's suffering. Ha admitted that if she had been more attentive to her mother, perhaps Lan wouldn't have had to live such a lonely and painful life. The police investigation didn't stop at arresting and prosecuting Thin. They delved deeper into the couple's past to understand why their marriage had reached such a disastrous end. Through their investigation, the police discovered that Thin and Lan's relationship had been deteriorating for years. Thin, an alcoholic, had a history of controlling and emotionally abusing his wife. Lan had endured this for a long time, but when her extramarital relationship was discovered, Thin could no longer tolerate it and began to resort to physical violence. Lan's friends confirmed that she had considered divorcing Thin many times, but societal pressure and her financial dependence on him prevented her from doing so. Whenever she confided in friends, it was because she had no one else to talk to. She often felt trapped in her marriage, unable to support herself due to her unstable job situation, while her husband constantly controlled her through possessiveness and violence. Further police investigation revealed that in the months leading up to the murder, Thin exhibited clear signs of psychological instability. Neighbors reported that he frequently drank and displayed irrational jealousy. The couple's recent arguments often revolved around Lan's meetings with friends, even though these were entirely innocent. This led Thin to live in a constant state of suspicion and jealousy, believing that Lan was still involved with another man, despite the affair having ended long ago. In the months before the murder, Lan had been planning to move elsewhere to escape the suffocating life she was leading. However, lacking financial stability and fearing for her children, she never followed through with her plans. Most of her phone calls to her daughter Ha were to check on her well-being, but Lan never wanted to worry her daughter, so she never mentioned what was truly happening in her own life. Preoccupied with her own life, Ha paid little attention to these subtle signs. The public's reaction to the case was also significant. The media extensively covered the story, particularly focusing on the issue of domestic violence. Many women's organizations, including the Vietnam Women's Union, strongly advocated for the protection of women's rights and encouraged domestic violence victims to come forward and report the abuse. Forums and television programs began discussing the matter, with psychologists, sociologists, and legal experts participating in finding solutions to help women facing similar situations. Psychologist Lê Hồng Phượng, who has worked with many domestic violence survivors, shared her insights. Cases like this show that domestic violence is not only about physical harm, but also years of psychological abuse that lead to unimaginable consequences. Victims, especially women, often don't speak up because they're afraid or lack support. This case is a wake-up call for society to implement better protective measures for victims. Phượng also emphasized the importance of psychological support after experiencing domestic violence. She noted that many women, even after escaping abusive situations, continue to suffer from the trauma for years, leading to depression and other severe mental health issues. We need to build a more comprehensive support system that not only helps victims escape violence, but also provides emotional care after they have survived it. As for Lê Văn Thìn, after his conviction, he showed little emotion. During the trial, he expressed his desire for forgiveness and hoped that his children would understand his actions. However, he also admitted that he did not know how to control his emotions and had let his anger get the best of him, leading to his violent and unacceptable actions. Nonetheless, the biggest question society continues to ask is why he chose violence to resolve family conflicts, and why he didn't seek reconciliation before things spiraled out of control. If this story has stirred your emotions and made you reflect on what's happening around you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Horrifying Obsession to stay updated on more chilling and shocking cases. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you're notified as soon as we upload new content. and share this story with your friends and family to raise awareness about domestic violence and help protect those who are vulnerable. Together, we can help prevent more tragedies like this from happening.